I'm doing a video on the best two drops to play, not just in blue steel. I think just the best two drops to play in steel. I think they've got a good spread. I think you can play them any of the steel decks and they'd be quite valid. Of course, if you're playing green steel, amber steel, or purple steel, you might just look at those color pairings and the other two drops you want to play. But I think overall these will be like the sort of base standard. It's very nice to play this on two and start establishing a board, start establishing something that can trade with things. And I'm looking at mainly two drops that do that. So you play it on two, and it's like, so they've played their one drop, their two drop. You now have a two drop to say, well, this is how I'm going to control the board, or start contesting it and start, just working towards winning the game, really. Of course, there are other two drops worth mentioning that I just haven't got on this short list. There is things like Dock, which, let's be honest, Dock isn't a two drop. That's like a draw mechanic that you don't tend to just play on two. You play draw more cards when you're later on, and you try and dump your hand and play the dock. There's a Robin Hood shift, there's a Cindy shift, there's a few other cards as well. There's a Mr. Arrow we got in the set, which I don't think is amazing, but there's a 1-2 that quests for 2 of resist 1. And those cards, that they can be used in their own valid ways, but I don't think they're really classed as like it's on curve sort of 2 drop. So that's what we're looking at here, a card that on 2 you want to play. And of course, I'll keep using blue steel as the example, but I think these are sort of valid for all of the steel decks we've got around. So it's sort of starting off with the almost honourable mention, which I just have to mention because I like the card, but I don't think it works at all in set 6, so probably not worth playing at all. Is Arges. I mean, into a red meta, it was kind of really good to play him on 2. You got 4 attack power on board to start dealing with locations. You could trade into Sisu. You threaten pretty much anything they would play from turn 1 to 3. You could trade into, but right now we're in quite a strong steel meta. He always dies. He's just a trade, basically. He's just going to stop someone turning sideways for a free trade. But yeah, he's just an honorary mention, I think, unless the meta somehow really heavily shifted back to red. I don't see him worth playing, so more of an honorary mention just to start it off with. I'm going to go actually with the next one is Mr. Smee, mainly because in my opinion, Mr. Smee he's the all-rounder. I don't think any steel deck would lose any value by playing him on 2. I think he's very good. He's a 2-quester, so into the red matchups or the control sort of decks, then they play characters quite later on in the game. Or when he had the opportunity to just start sending sideways, he's really good for that. He trades into everything. That 1 damage doesn't matter much into most decks, especially if you can probably get him to do a 2 for 1. You kill a 1 drop, he turns sideways, and then they have to hit the 2 drop into it. Into blue steel, of course, you can heal it. Rapunzel can heal it in amber steel. You can be bounced with the snake in purple steel. He's just all round. You're never going to have a bad game if you're not going to have a bad game. Probably might have a bad game, but you're never going to be losing much value if you on 2 just play Smee, because he can go in so many different directions. He can start questing. He can start, like I say, can start trading. So I think overall, if you're in a position where you don't know what 2 drop to put in your deck, always just start with Smee at a 4x, and he should be good enough value for you to sort of start building a deck around it. Like I say, always tend to hunt for him as well. He's just a really strong card to play on 2. So I think he's our all-rounder. He's like our baseline character. And from that, I'm going to say as well, I was going to tier list these cards and say like, oh, this is the best 2 drop for steel. This is the best, tier 1, tier. But what I've noticed is you can't really do that with these cards. Besides Smee just being all round probably the best 2 drop in steel to play, because he does everything. He quests, he trades, he's just really threatening on board. All the other ones, they excel in different directions. They excel at different things. And for example, we'll jump into Jim Hawkins here. He's a 0-4 when you play him, so he's not that threatening. And I don't think into Amber Steel or Purple Steel you could really find any value with him. But into Blue Steel, of course, you have that shift line that's amazing. If you're able to get the Quill down, you've now got a 4-4 that can attack, so that can kill a Daisy. Threatening 4 attack on the board for location removal as well. You can kill a Sisu. 4-4 is just really good. The downsides I find with the card is, again, he's a 1-quester. I'm only going to talk about Blue Steel actually at this point because, well, really, it's the only deck that would ever play him. He's a 1-quester, so if you want to go the aggro route of the matchup and just start gaining your lore, you can't really do that. He's 0-4. I mean, you don't get brawled much with it, but sometimes that happens. And if you were to say do a situation where you ramp a couple times, kill a Daisy, and you've left him sideways, and they've got like a Smee or any sort of thing that can challenge it, he's just a free trade for them. Same with Fox into purple decks. They're just going to easily get a free trade, and they're going to have a full healthy Fox on their board. Any character they hit into it is going to be healthy. So there's those negatives, and I find with him it's very awkward when you want to be the things turn sideways for him. So if you want to kill that Daisy, that's fine, but then like I say, the snapback's pretty bad, and then they kind of remove your really strong two drop or your sort of thing that's keeping the board in check, and you've got no board after that point. Because if you've gone Jim Quill into take out a Daisy, they're going to hit back, and then you have zero things on your board. So yeah, I find him just a little bit short of being amazing. I think if you're playing a blue steel wheel list where you're running the shift line, I think for sure you have to play it because you need the shift line, don't you? But into other decks, yeah, I just feel he's not pulling his weight enough. I am looking for location removal in my decks, and I think he is a good thing to include if you want to go down just having lots of attack power on board. And I do also worth mentioning, you're pretty much always going to be ramping every turn with Blue Steel, but there are moments where you don't want to ramp, and him just being a 2/4 is pretty rough. If you miss ramp on 3, it's pretty rough. You'd definitely rather have the Smee on board as a 3/3 than you'd rather have a 2/4. It finds that if you play him and you miss ramp on 3, he's just not gonna lose you the game, but you're in a really rough spot at that point because all you've got is a 2/4 and you're just putting stuff on the board and inking for one. So yeah, I've kind of in no wheel. I found him very short of being amazing. I think in blue steel wheel, if you're going to run the shift line, of course you have to run him, so you can just start getting the value there. And you have that really cool mechanic where you can shift him and after ramping, and you still get the challenger buff. So there's some really cool things of it. But I think he's really just got that purpose of, do you really want to kill a Daisy and start threatening locations? Then probably play Jim, and that's my sort of real ruling on the card. It's not much else more to say on it, really. I'm going to cover Calhoun last, actually, because I really want to talk about Magic Broom. Magic Broom is one that I've really loved, and it originally came into decks because it's a really good way to check the Diablo. You know, you have the fire the cannons to stop the shift line, but also now you have a 2/3 that can trade and it will survive. And dealing 3 damage tends to be a little bit awkward. They're going to have to go free wide, sorry, and find Strength of the Raging Fire rather than just let the Storm Rage on if you had like Sage of Far or the new Smee card that does the same effect. So the broom sort of stuck around. Of course, it doesn't clear it with the cove, but I guess if you run it in and fire the cannons, it's not there for that. It's there for just a normal Diablo. And as we go into the new set with cards like Genie, of course, looking at a 2/3 doesn't really trade up well into a 2/4. But what it does is it allows you to get that maths going for you. So if you play it on 2, you keep playing your game plan, and they're going board wide, and you get to a point where you can sing grab your swords or play grab your swords or whatever. You can play it, then hit the Genie, take it out, and you've still got this on board. So it just adds that nice little bit of steel maths, in my opinion. And just he's quite threatening as well. On top of that, because he doesn't take the 1 damage from that Smee would take at the end of its turn. If they have 1/1 goons on board, say they're setting up, they play 1/1s like Robin Hood or whatever Queen, and they miss the shift. They're just playing it to threaten the shift. They're not going to turn sideways with them, so they won't get the lore because he's just such a free hit on any 2/2 character, and he'll survive. And he's quite, like I say, he doesn't do much besides just takes out things that have 2 health and starts doing steel maths for things that have more. So he's very disposable. The lore, 1 lore is just, it doesn't matter. You're probably never going to turn sideways with him, but he just poses quite an annoying threat on board for most opponents, I find. So I really rate the Broom. I'm keeping it around, especially as we're going into a Genie meta. Of course, having the lack of attack power being only at 2, he's sort of, he's not going to threaten any locations. If you play it on 2, and then they start, they play a location on curve, you're going to be in a rough spot because you're just not going to have much attack power on board. If you had 3 with the Smee, and then you had a Tinkerbell coming out, you can now take out a Queen's Castle, so that's a really good spot. And if you had Jim and you had what's it called? Sorry, Tinkerbell, then you could do 8 and take out a library. But with him on board, it's kind of a bit scary if they're going to play locations. But as I said, the card has relatively been used before the addition of Genie, just to deal with green steel decks. So that's the only time he really came out onto the board. But going forward, I think it's pretty good. I think into green purple as well. Even like a Go-Go, you can kill a Go-Go. There's just a lot of evasive cheesing that's going to go on. And I don't think I'm ever going to see it at a Continental or anything like that, or DLC. But you've got these weird like red-green. There's loads of evasives around basically right now. Red-green evasive as well, with all the pirates and stuff like that. That's quite interesting. And you're just seeing those being played, so just having an evasive check in your deck is pretty nice. And as I say, the Genie right now is kind of annoying, so it's just nice to be able to do your usual steel maths, and then you also have an evasive to hit the Genie and take it out. So for me right now, he's sticking around on my list as the sort of just the other 2-drop that I play alongside Smee. And that's why I say, sort of bigging up Smee. I always tend to just have Smee in the list because he's just so solid and he does everything all round. It's never really a bad situation when you're going to play a Smee on 2. Your opponent's probably not going to like a Smee on 2, seeing that 3/3 on board that quests for 2, so they can go either direction of getting lore with it or start trading things. I did think this set was going to be the set where we drop Smee because we've got so many other powerful two drops, but it kind of still feels like that meta where you put Smee in your deck as a 4x, and then you put 3 to 4 of the other two drop, depending on what direction you want your deck to go in. If you want to be covering the evasives, or you want to be covering maybe locations or something like that. And the last card is Calhoun, which, saying all of that about how amazing Smee is, in my opinion, if this card was inkable, she probably would have replaced Smee. Not taking that one damage when you turn sideways is pretty cool. Against aggro decks, you're in a position where you can gain a lot of lore by the two lore gained and start trading up the board. So you're denying them lore or like equalizing their board, and you're still gaining lore. The uninkable spot is just sort of where it becomes rough because especially for blue steel, and I don't think amber steel would run it either. I think they've got too many uninkables. Purple steel, I can definitely see it in purple steel. I think it's a really good spot for purple steel, especially as they don't have as many ways to look after the Smee's damage counter that's popping. Whereas we have Porpsicle and amber steel has Rapunzel, so there's some even for amber steel, there's benefits to the Smee hurting themselves because then they can get some lore from it. With purple steel, the only way they can really reset the Smee is if they bounce it. But I think Calhoun's a really good addition for them. I don't think they run too many uninkables. They're probably going to be including Genie, but I think the card is very strong on that list, and it's a really good board equalizer. And you can turn sideways and not take a damage the same way Smee does. Let's say if this card was inkable, I think we would have just been running it. But because we're so tight on inkables, it's kind of got to the point in my testing at least where we're just going to have to be fine with Smee. I don't really feel positive in rearranging all the other inkables in the deck, like the bigger cards like the dime and the aerials and cards like that, just to try work in these two drops because they might have a potential better outcome than Smee would. I mean, again, still if they go free wide, play strength, they kill it. There's loads of things it can do. The best thing I find it can do is it threatens all one drops and is not going to die to those one drops. Whereas Smee, if it was to hit a Chernobog, it'll kill itself the next turn because it will take the one damage. But she's always going to threaten the one drops, and she basically forces them to pop things like Chernobog and Broom and stuff like that because they can't turn sideways with it. She's such a free attack on them. Whereas Smee can only really do the Broom, and then he'll start damaging himself. So there's always that worry as well. Whereas she just takes these free trades and these one drops, and even two drops that don't have more than two attack. If it's a two attacker, it's like Flynn or something like that. They can't take the free trade. Whereas if you play an opponent that's gonna have a Flynn, they probably won't quest with it, but sometimes they do. They probably won't quest with it if they have Sisu. Flynn's not a really good example, but there is a lot of any two drop that has less than two attack. They won't really quest with them because Calhoun will just take them for a free hit, whereas Smee will probably just die in that trade, and it's always a bit risky. And then she also pairs really well with Cogsworth as well, doubling up that resist. So I think just she's really, really good and really powerful, but I'm just not finding enough to fit her in the list, and I don't think just having her in the list is going to potentially make the deck a lot better, especially in blue steel, I don't think. But I think right now purple steel is a really good spot for it to go in, and I think even green steel could look at using this card quite well. But again, at the uninkable count with the Prince John, Diablo, and Let the Storm Rage on, and all those cards, and also most likely they want to morph onto anyway. So she probably just misses the cut. But I think if this card was inkable, it would have been a staple in most steel lists. But because it's not, it's slightly falling onto can I really afford it? I don't think I can afford it. So it's probably just going to be purple steel that ends up playing it. But yeah, that's just sort of talking through my thought process of all the two drops in the game. Of course, there's other two drops, but I think these are the only ones that really worth noting. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, Smee was just printed in set 3 and it's been nothing but a powerhouse since. You got so many ways to keep it alive with Captain Hook or any captains. So even Amber still keeps it alive with Piglet. We have Porpsicles, Rapunzel, and yeah, he quests for 2. I mean, his stats are just better than all the other ones. And his negative thing of 1 damage taken isn't particularly that bad. So yeah, that's sort of all my opinions on on all the 2 drops in set 6, and I hope some of that rambling was useful.